Assalamualaikum. Greetings of peace, and thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Especially thanks to Wunfang for the kind introduction. And it's my great pleasure being invited here to talk about the topic of spirituality. First of all, I'd like to mention that it's a topic which I find it very important, interesting, but also very new. And to many doctors, nurses, it's something that is not really part of the teaching as we usually undergo it. And it's something that we will discover together this afternoon. Huh? So standing here on the horizon and gazing into space. Basically, the content of what I'm going to talk about is divided into three. One will be, first of all, what do we mean by spirituality? If you hear about the term, what is it supposed to refer to? What are you supposed to be thinking of when you hear about spirituality? Then there's a very important part about what does motor neuron disease have to do with spirituality, and then a few practical pointers that are meant maybe as a starting point to look more into spirituality resources. And I very much do hope and encourage everyone to ask their questions, because it's something of a new topic to us, and also we are not talking about it quite as much as we should. And if you do have any questions, by all means, very glad to take the questions after this, and also keep them posting in the chat box as we speak. Now, when we hear about spirituality, it maybe gets associated with a few different ideas that get mixed up, and there's a lot of uncertainty of what do we really mean by spirituality. And sometimes we don't think it's so much a part of medicine, because after all, medicine is about medications, about treatments, about diagnosis and the hospitals and the technical part of treatment. But yet there's a whole lot more about undergoing treatment, and also about the fact of going through a diagnosis of motor neuron disease. So for example, nowadays, we know that even though there is no cure for motor neuron disease, the idea and the goal that we have is that we want to make it a livable disease, living with motor neuron disease. It means many things on the level of physical experience, on the level of social experience, interact with the family and work, but also at the very heart of our being, at the core, what does it mean for our future, for our hopes, being diagnosed with motor neuron disease, and what are the resources that we can draw from. And this is a bit of a dry text here, but it's nevertheless very widely accepted. And maybe we can just focus on those things which are highlighted in the definition of spirituality. So when a lot of experts got together, they basically stated that spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. Now, these definitions, they're always very long, and nevertheless, if we look at it, we know for sure one thing that is very important is meaning and purpose, and the connectedness. Being connected is one thing that matters a lot in motor neuron disease, because this is a disease which, sadly, if we do not have the resources and at first may not be very well linked with the support, then there's a high likelihood of experiencing isolation, not being able to do things like before, not being able to relate to the family, friends, and work like before, and therefore experiencing isolation, not being connected, and even being disconnected from oneself, because being connected to oneself is about really the awareness. How are we experiencing our life? What are our hopes and fears? And really pausing at the important points in life to make sure we are in touch with what is our spiritual life. Everyone knows that feeling tired, feeling hungry, and feeling exhausted maybe. So bodily sensations are very familiar to all of us. And at the same time, we also have moments that we feel either very hopeless, very much down, with a sense of no clear sense of what is going to happen. And sometimes even we feel despair because there is no hope. And at other times we may feel that there's a lot of things in life that matter a great deal to us, a lot of things that we look forward to, that we hope. And even though we know that there's uncertainty and we are not sure that these things which we hopeful they will happen, but we can imagine that it would happen. Yeah, so highlighted here in red are the things that that we might take away from it. And I think most importantly, it's about meaning and connectedness if we talk about spirituality. And the way that we use the word meaning, normally most familiar to us will be in a sentence like, oh, I did not understand what you meant, or what do you mean? And normally then the person will say the same thing they intend to say in a slightly different way. And likewise, when we look at images like this, we are also asking what they mean. And there are different ways that painters have approached their art through the centuries. And it has been changing at times. There are different schools of thought. And I'm not an art expert myself by any means, but it's quite interesting. If we look at this picture, it would seem, I would believe it is a so-called abstract art that one doesn't see something that is concrete. That's not the way that it really is, but nevertheless, it is the way that an artist sees it. And the interesting part is when we consider this person having drawn, I think it is probably nearly 100 years ago, this image, is sharing with us, even though the person has passed, they are sharing with us the way that they once looked at the world. So we are at this moment connected to how this painter looked at the world. So obviously we can marvel at how brilliantly colors are chosen and how skillful is the composition, or else we might think, well, this looks rather weird and I might not spend a lot of time looking at it. So on the one hand side, you either enjoy looking at it or not, but at the same time, we also realize that once you look at it, you try to identify what are the things that we can see in there. And that is very much the gist of meaning, which meaning as humans, we try to make meaning of things. And the meaning that is in these pictures is at the same time something that they carry in themselves. Yeah, this is something that this picture means that, but it's also something that we make of it and that we bring to it. And that maybe everyone has their very own way of looking at an image, and they may see very different things, and it may trigger very different responses according to what they have been experienced in life, whether they have something seen something similar before. Just to mention another term, sometimes we talk about aesthetics also. So aesthetics means that when we look at a picture, we have a sense of what this thing should look like. It's sort of like a should thinking. It should look like a person has a particular appearance, and a landscape should have a particular appearance. And likewise, when we talk about our life and experiences of living with disease, we have a particular idea of what things should be like. And this so-called aesthetic is something very important, because we may often take it for granted. Things should be like this, but in reality, it's not something that everyone has the same has the same way of thinking what they should be like. So for example, as another marvelous example of art, there has been a long history of these cave paintings, where we found them worldwide, and the estimates are that they are even 20,000 years old. So just to ponder that at one point, people had this idea and this activity in which they shared, which it connected them, and probably it was a fun thing for them to do. At least it looks like on a lot of the cave paintings that we have, they almost resemble our cartoons of modern day. They seem to have a particular humorist twist to them. Small humans, huge animals, and a particular way of looking at life that was unique to our ancestors, but that nevertheless is preserved in these paintings. And hence, it's just to really give an idea of how broad is the topic of spirituality, and across how vast amounts of time and space we can share these meanings. So we can share that there's been a community of our ancestors before, and we can learn from their experience through their art. And likewise, it's a very important part of spirituality to soak in nature and make a point of experiencing nature and living in this part of the world. I think this experience of being in a rainforest is something very much touching everyone, especially maybe, I mean, as Wunfang said, my background is not having seen something similar because I migrated at a later age. And once we enter these places, we immediately get a sense of the aesthetics, of the beauty of nature that surrounds us, of the harmony and of the composition, and how things are naturally very much giving us a sense of being at peace, at being in our element. And we feel that this is literally life as it originally was on this planet. And especially in Malaysia, of course, rainforests have been around for millions of years. And as we enter them, we do get this feeling that our own life, even though much of it is confined to concrete buildings, rectangular structures, roads with traffic jams, but on and off, through experiencing nature, we do get this very crucial experience of being connected to nature, to our roots, and to achieving a sense of peace that we do not otherwise get. And there are many ways that we can experience it. For example, even if you step in front of the house in the morning, take in the early morning air, you will immediately feel that difference to the other times of the day. And likewise, we appreciate changing of seasons. We appreciate nature growing, fading, going through a cycle. And it is easily the most rich source of inspiration that we should not neglect to draw into, as much as it may be difficult in the environment we're in. This is a picture of Mars, curiously. And the reason I show it is that I think it speaks to another aspect of spirituality, which is our curiosity, our need or desire to know and explore more, and also our fascination as we learn. So, I mean, as a species, of course, we could be trying to aim for so many things, but one of it is always pushing boundaries of what we know, satisfying our curiosity and finding out more about the universe we live in. And I think it's a truly awe-inspiring view. One may say, what is the practical use of traveling to Mars? And that's maybe an ethical debate on its own, how taxpayers' money should be spent and the like. But nevertheless, when we take in these views, we also get a particular sense of our place in the universe. So, for example, since we're talking about spirituality, the origin of the word spirit is to do with breathing. It is the spirit that that animates us. It is that which in the Abrahamic faiths is the spirit of human given by God, or else what other traditions consider animating as the spirit. It has to do with breathing in any case. And if we look at the universe that surrounds us, we find out that curiously, there is no other place that we know of where we could breathe. Beautiful as Mars is, our Earth is very unique, and the place that we're in is very unique. And our breathing here is so much central to our existence that it makes sense we should call the spiritual life, because if we consider what are the things that we most need in life, of course, we have bodily needs, food, drink, warmth, comfort, safety from the elements, but we also need a sense of peace and a sense of hope and a sense of knowing who we are and where's our place in the universe. And that's why, in a way, even though we do not usually consider spirituality in the same urgency like we consider other medical life-saving treatments, it is nevertheless something which is very important to talk about. And also in the definition just now, there was a mention of the so-called sacred. And what is sacred really? I would say in today's day and age, it's quite easy. The sacred places are those places where your phone has to be off and you cannot have any incoming calls. And it sounds funny perhaps to think about it that way, but if we consider those places which are sacred to a lot of people, for example, in Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, or Christianity, then it seems very natural that when we go to these places, there's no role for those concerns of life that are not sacred. There's a sense that beyond taking calls, being connected to our day-to-day life, we also have a very urgent need to attend to another sense of connection, being connected to those things which matter most, which are the sacred things to us. When we talk about spirituality and motor neuron disease, there may not be many resources. If we look on the internet, there's a lot of information on all aspects of motor neuron disease, treatments, supportive measures, research, which hospitals are offering specialized motor neuron disease care, how to get help. But there's very little in the way of what does spirituality have to do with motor neuron disease. And hopefully in the time to come, we can address better what are the particular spirituality-related problems in motor neuron disease. And I will just go over a few here. And for example, one of it is isolation. Isolation is something which may be experienced as easily the most distressing thing for many patients when they feel that their connections which they used to have to their family, to friends, to colleagues, to people in the public, to customers, to people in the place where they work, these connections are lost. They feel that even though the mind is very clear and maybe in our heart, the aim that we have in life is the same. As a professional, we have a lot of goals and we want to achieve these things. Or maybe as a father, as a mother, sister, brother, we are very clear what matters to us. It seems that suddenly we are on our own and we are not longer part of these groups that we used to belong to, even though we also know that it is possible to continue a lot of these roles. A lot of patients with motor neuron disease, they could continue certain aspects of their work which are meaningful, and therefore this isolation could be overcome. Isolation also may be a problem with regards to communication. For example, if speech is affected in motor neuron disease, it's a very different experience being among people, and finding that to exchange thoughts is not as effortless as it was before. But at the same time, it is noticed that once this difficulty can be overcome and people do share their thoughts, maybe we do not even need as many words to communicate. And this isolation can be overcome through communication on a level that could be much deeper than the many words that we make, and that sometimes our speech is faster than our thought. So hopefully this aspect of communication can help with the isolation. And then there's uncertainty, which is, of course, easily very distressing if we are not sure about what the future will hold for us. And also when we find that there does not seem to be any way of knowing it for sure. So at a basic level, everyone knows that maybe like Forrest Gump, life is a box of chocolates and we do not know what will happen. But in a particular sense with motor neuron disease, it's a lot of times the case that it's very hard to predict what exactly would be the next things that we are to expect. So this uncertainty is the reality that life is such, and having to deal with us may affect the way that we make meaning of life, the things that happen to us. And another thing is unfamiliarity. Often the situation that patients and their families may find is that when they are meeting doctors and nurses and other practitioners, that there may not be any much familiarity with the disease because it's not very common and it's not very much the main concern of medical centers. So it's even worse that having had this diagnosis, then people have to find out on their own what are the resources and where do they even get them and where to link up. So in addition to the isolation, it's the experience of going on a journey where there's no where there's no easy map available, and hopefully that also in the future will be wanting to improve. And also there is decision making, where we feel that in life we look backwards, and even before a diagnosis of motor neuron disease, we ponder about decisions we've made and career choices or choices of where to live, who to live with, were decisions we made. And in retrospect, we look on these decisions and we feel glad or not so glad about them. But in this disease in particular, there's a tremendous burden sometimes having to make decisions and just not knowing that, is it the correct decision? And when, for example, doctors and patients meet, of course, it's easy to talk about facts, talk about what is the situation with a given diagnosis and what are the options of treatment available, even if not a cure. But how exactly will that play out? And for example, if one were to choose this, what will happen then? What would it be like to choose this treatment or not to choose this treatment? And that's something which is sometimes very stressful if we're not sure. Is it a decision that who should make the decision? Is it something that we should leave it either to the patient or the doctor, or is it that the decision should be made together? And ideally, of course, the point in spirituality is finding out what is it that makes life meaningful for a patient and their family, so that it can then only be decided what is the best way of treatment. So to show it in a diagram, this discussion about spirituality might sometimes be very simple, as in maybe a doctor asking a patient, what are the things that really matter to you in life? My family, so-called quality of life, being able to enjoy favorite foods, able to travel. And of course, that's something everyone has been missing in the recent pandemic. Or is it being at home? And of course, our homes are very special places to us. They are in a way also sacred. And maybe it sounds funny that because we might think the sacred place is like a church or a mosque or a temple, but even our homes can be very much sacred places, because we find that we are enjoying privacy, we are able to be ourselves, to realize our ambitions, and we can choose our activities freely, and we can completely truly be ourselves. We don't have to be aware of how we appear to others. But maybe also traveling is very important, and for some people maybe that idea of going to that particular place or going to a particular function may be very important to them. And that are things which we could discuss, for example, in a very general question: what is meaningful to you? So if in future, as patients and doctors, we sit together, maybe those are things that at first they don't seem to be related to medicine. One might think that, well, since I'm seeing a doctor, then it makes sense to talk about pain or difficulty moving around. But what's the point talking about my plans to go to a particular destination? Or what is the point talking about something that is coming up, like a wedding or a graduation or something? And hopefully in future, if we can be more aware of spirituality, we can see that those are very important things, because we can then focus on how do we make these things reality, rather than we just focus on disease, or we just focus on whether to have a particular treatment, and we miss the point. We miss the point of whether is it possible to attend this wedding or achieve this particular ambition. I mean, at a very basic level, one might say, okay, everyone wants to enjoy food and family, be at home and travel. And everyone also wants to have the most optimum treatment, and they don't mind going to hospital. But in reality, it's hardly ever possible for doctors to know, unless we've had this discussion, what are the things that really matter. And for example, sometimes we might think, well, since medicine is so advanced and many years of study should leave a doctor in a good position to decide whether this treatment is good. In reality, it's very difficult sometimes if patients said, what would you do? Because even if someone very close to us were to ask us, well, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? How can we be sure that we are really in their shoes? How can we be sure that we do know what is it that matters most to the person until we've really had the discussion? So that's why it's very important to talk about what are the things that matter. And especially with regards to spirituality, it could also be about what are spiritual practices that matter. So for example, people might or might not have a particular religious affiliation or a particular belief, and that might be very meaningful to them, being able to attend a service, being able to perform a particular ritual. And if that is the case, then it's very important to talk about it, and also to talk about which are the ways that we can rope in support. So for example, from a community of fellow believers, or from charity organizations, and from other resources that are available. So sometimes there may be a role for very much discussing these issues as well. What is someone's belief and practices? And also, as we've learned more about spirituality in the past years, we've come across some resources that can be very helpful for patients and their carers. So for example, what do we mean by finding meaning in life? And one of the people who contributed a great deal to it is a person called Viktor Frankl, who had a terrible experience of himself being a prisoner in a concentration camp in the Second World War. And he eventually pondered on this experience he had, and he found out that indeed it's very helpful to think about what are the problems in our day-to-day life in terms of what is it that really at the most profound part of ourselves gives meaning to our life. And what do we mean in that case? So for example, it could be a particular life task that we dedicate ourselves to. So for example, here we see Rosalind Franklin, who has discovered the structure of DNA as one of the main researchers who sadly hasn't been given the credit that she was due in her time. But it's easy to see that in life, we do have these goals, these very big dreams that are so meaningful to us that we can easily say it's that which is most meaningful to us. And if nothing else in life achieves a goal, we would be so happy if that happens. And it could be those things like discovering DNA, or it could be simple things. And that would be quote unquote simple things, but things which are nevertheless very meaningful to us. Seeing children grow up, grandchildren grow up, and also having a sense of contributed to society, having been a resource to others, and having improved the lives of others. I think it's very appropriate here also to introduce this lady whose name is Cicely Saunders, and she is the person who has been the most momentous force behind what is so-called palliative care, which means the movement that has been improving the quality of life for patients with a serious illness, like patients with motor neuron disease. And she has had a very strong religious background, a very significant spiritual life as a Christian, but she also observed that medicine, which she saw practiced in the early 20th century, didn't do what she thought was meaningful, and that was to let patients live to their fullest. So she's known for having said that you matter because you are you, and you matter because you matter until the end of your life. So that means that when medicine is discussed, or when we are talking about the goals, people matter because they are themselves, and because they have a personality, because they are not just another patient, but because they are a person who has had a past, who is living in a present with loved ones, with family, and who is looking to a future. And it does not take away from someone's dignity that they are diagnosed with a particular disease. And in a lot of cases that she saw, it turned out to be very simple to improve the quality of life. So for example, simply by relieving pain, it is so much more easy to live to one's fullest if one is free from pain and able to pursue one's ambitions. So this idea of loving selflessly and finding meaning in improving the lives of others is something for which she has become famous and very much appreciated. And also part of finding meaning can be what is called suffering bravely. And what does that mean? Sometimes when we discuss the word suffering, one might think it's bad and it's something that we want to avoid by all means. And that is natural. I think everyone's instinct is that suffering tends to be something which we'd rather avoid. And yet, when we look at the experiences, for example, of Nelson Mandela, there's a very strong indication of how suffering can transform not just the life of one person, but literally touch so many more lives. And it's by no means to say that anyone would enjoy their suffering, but rather that when we study the biographies of these people like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi or many others for the matter, we find that truly their suffering has been meaningful. And in that sense, it is often said that the suffering ceases to be suffering the moment that it meets with meaning. And for example, what is the meaning in Nelson Mandela's case? It's this spirit of reconciliation where decades and centuries of hostility have gone before. And in just one generation, his experience has so profoundly touched millions of lives that we can say it is from the experience of suffering that something truly great was achieved by the human spirit. So that is suffering bravely. Another resource in overcoming difficulty dealing with suffering is mindfulness. And what do we mean by mindfulness? And how do we practice it? So if we look at, once again, a basic definition, we often find that it is being described as paying attention non-judgmentally in the moment on purpose. And commonly, of course, the association of mindfulness is with Buddhism, where it's a major aspect of the practice and the belief. But at the same time, it is also common to many spiritual traditions that there is an element of meditation, pondering, finding quiet, and really being mindful. And what does that mean? Paying attention non-judgmentally. To put it in an easy way, we could say it means that for a few moments to turn off the autopilot, which is normally active as we go through life. So for example, as we go through an ordinary day, we call it ordinary because a lot of things happen that are somewhat expected, and our mind may not be as open as it could be to the many wonders, the many small things, and also the many sacred things that we can identify, that we can find in our day-to-day life if we are doing them mindfully. What are the things we could be mindful of? So for example, as is commonly practiced in Buddhist meditation, would be focusing on one's breath and literally on the breath as one breathes in and out, and also observe that at the same time one is having thoughts, and thoughts come and pass. And likewise, these thoughts are either up for us to follow them through or to not follow them through. And in that sense, we gain a sense of mastery over our experience. It's very powerful realizing that we can regulate our own psychological functioning this way, and we can become aware of what are the issues, what are the concerns that we really have, and what are the behaviors or the thoughts that sometimes we don't even intend to have, but we automatically follow them based on something that triggers. And if we achieve this moment of mindfulness, we realize that a lot of the events which are inevitable in life that happen do leave us with a space where we are free to choose. How do we react towards them? And it's not fictional, it's not imaginary, it's very real that we could choose to either respond one way to it or another way. And that is non-judgmental. So it does not mean that reacting in a particular way is good or bad, but we do have that freedom. And likewise, in Abrahamic faiths, we are also practicing rituals that are correctly considered as mindfulness if we, for example, do very ordinary things with the intention of pleasing God. So for example, even a day-to-day action that may be very ordinary, so to speak, as some housework, cooking, driving to work, it suddenly becomes meaningful if we realize that it forms part of our effort to live in accordance with what we believe is our place in the universe. So for example, as Muslims, to start things with Bismillah means that, yeah, one is hoping it will be part of what is the spiritual intention that one has. And likewise, in Christianity, there are practices of regular service, like Hail Mary or other practices that are common and which also are considered mindfulness. And it is very flexible. One could really choose any time of the day, any place that one is in, and take that small holiday from one's experience to just ponder the moment, and for a brief moment not be engrossed in what happened before and what will happen then, but really enjoy the present moment, which is literally a present, a gift as such. And similarly, we can adopt a practice that is called gratitude journaling. And that means that we write a diary, which in and of itself is a great way of connecting with oneself, because writing is very much thinking in a way that is more meaningful, because we are putting in written something that matters to us. And as we do so, the thoughts take a much clearer shape and we can share them with others. It connects us with them. There's nothing quite like unearthing a diary from some ancestor, grandfather of long ago, grandmother, whatever the case may be, and realizing that this experience, which was recorded, transcended time. And as we do this, putting thoughts into written, what we also achieve is a clearer sense of what is happening to us. And if we deliberately focus on writing down the things that we feel grateful for, we do notice in the first place that there are so many things to be grateful for, despite the things which are difficult and despite the suffering that we experience. And also we realize that this experience of recording things we've been grateful for literally multiplies the experience of happiness that we had with them. It allows us to relive this moment of happiness in the shape of something that we really produce in the mind. But this process of recalling it is very powerful, and even in clinical studies that have been done has been proven to be a very helpful technique, just to write down what are the things we are feeling grateful for. Another very powerful technique that is central to being human has been found by a psychologist from Hungary originally, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and it has been called by him the experience of flow. And what he noticed was that some people achieve a particular state of mind if they are engrossed in their activities. So for example, athletes or professionals or artists or programmers or people who play games or who do crafts, who have hobbies, they can achieve a state of mind where time either stands still or flies, but where certainly they are completely detached from their day-to-day experience, and they get so absorbed in something that they can experience an optimal sense of happiness, and they can truly achieve a peace of mind through that activity. And how does this work? Usually those activities are special because they involve something which we can do, which is easily available to us, like reading a book, playing games, swimming, and it does challenge us to a degree. So for example, reading a book, of course, we could just as well watch TV and it's much more easy, it's much more available, easier. But also we get a sense of truly sharing the author's minds, following their thoughts and benefiting, truly sharing with an author if we read a book that we find meaningful. So we achieve this state of flow. And likewise with games, we don't usually like to play games that are too easy. We want them to be at just the right level of difficulty. So for example, one might play a jump and run game where the character tries to reach the end of the level for many hundreds of times unsuccessfully. And yet we are entertained because we have a sense that this is something which we can do it, but we have to put ourselves to it. And we feel that as we put ourselves to it, there's progress we make, and there's a journey that we travel on and we improve. And likewise, if we are involved in handicrafts, we literally feel that under our hands, something beautiful emerges. And much unlike our life, which is online and networked, we really do something with our hands, and we experience the meaning of action, of doing something in the world, of crafting something that is beautiful and that has meaning. And likewise, I can warmly recommend the practice of sourdough baking as a means of achieving this state of flow. So it's really simple, and we gain a great deal of fulfillment and happiness by focusing on spending our times on those things which lead us to a state of mind that we call flow. It could be just as simple as having a conversation. And another technique that has been found is the so-called building of a legacy. And what is a legacy really? A legacy is this idea of what is it our life should achieve and that we would like to be remembered for in a time when family remember us. And even as we flip through photo albums, it's quite easy for us to appreciate this sense of joy as we ponder who in our family looked similar to who and how life was different then. So it's on the one hand side entertaining, but it also gives a very strong sense of identity, and especially so if in facing some disease like motor neuron disease, it brings back that which really is the things that we find defining in our lives that really matter for us. And sometimes they can reorient us to what should we really be focusing on. And when this person who designed the idea of developing legacy documents, which is also known as dignity therapy, came up with it, he was inspired by looking at a person who has suffered disease and was affected in their appearance, but yet there were pictures of the person when they were very much more well, and that became very powerful in bringing back these memories. And the fabulous thing about our imagination is that we can literally transport ourselves into these moments. And even though in body and in physical condition we may be restricted, either from a diagnosis of motor neuron disease or otherwise, we can still travel very far by imagination and in our mind. And building these documents, sifting through photo albums, and even writing down one's experience is a very powerful tool in achieving that. And with that, I pretty much reached the end of what I was going to say about spirituality. At the heart of it, I would say, in the beautiful words of Martin Luther King, is that we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. So what is the key in spirituality? It's about how do we maintain this hope, and what are the things that we hope to, and how do we make this a reality. And very much as a point to take away in future is, hopefully as patients and carers and the healthcare teams, if we meet in the future, may we pay more attention to what are the things that really we should be paying attention to. And that doesn't mean that we would not discuss details of medical treatment, but that we even more meaningfully discuss them in the setting of really truly knowing for this person what is the most important in their life, and therefore what is the best thing that we should do together as a team of patients, carers, and the healthcare professionals.